6 games were on Wednesday night's Major League Soccer schedule. Only one of them played, Orlando beating Nashville 3-1. The other 5 postponed as players on those teams chose not to play in light of the police shooting of Jacob Blake in Wisconsin. That following a trend across American sports Wednesday night. No NBA, no WNBA. Most of Major League Baseball postponed as well. One of the MLS matches that was postponed, LAFC and Real Salt Lake. RSL owner Dell Loy Hansen gave an interview Thursday morning on the radio. Some controversial comments. Let's dive into them. Quote, "The players clearly supported national issues, but it's very apparent that they didn't support our local community. There's a profound disappointment that the spirit that is Real was abandoned last night. Obviously, the importance of bringing community together during COVID was not respected. The disrespect was profound to me personally. It's taken a lot of wind out of my sails, what effort I want to put into recruiting players and building a great team. It just seems that's not a very good path to take. We will not be inviting fans back to the stadium in the future, so tomorrow I start cutting 40 to 50 jobs." All right, there's a lot to unpack in that. To do so, we welcome in Herculez Gomez, Shaka Hislop. Shaka, before we get to the decision for the players not to play on Wednesday night, let's discuss these comments, your reaction, especially when Dell Loy Hansen calls the players' decision disrespectful.
Well, I thought it was tone deaf, and that's putting it as nicely as I possibly can. And as much as he's referencing the community around Real Salt Lake and what they represent as a club, at no point do I think he addresses the African-American community, people of color, who continue to see people who look just like them killed in the streets at the hands of law enforcement. At no point has he addressed those issues, seems to address those issues, or seems to want to address those issues. And that's the biggest disappointment for athletes of color, for people of color, that nobody seems to even want to discuss it. Here are concerns. Try to figure out what next steps should be in addressing those concerns. We're continually sat down, lectured to, told how we are to feel, told how we are to respond, and if we don't do exactly as they describe, then somehow it's all our fault. Seb, in short, I know more about Real Salt Lake's fan base, and one fan in particular who's coming from Idaho, than I know what Real Salt Lake are doing in support of their fans and their communities who identify as people of color.
Herc, I know you saw the comments as well. Wonder what your reaction was, and also wonder what you're hearing from MLS players.
They're disgusted. I'm disgusted. Like you, like Shaka, like everybody else out there. Dell Loy Hansen completely missed the plot. This is why players in multiple leagues are protesting, because ownership groups, owners like Dell Loy Hansen, have the ability to pick up a phone, and in their phone they have contacts of government officials, of politicians, of people of power who can change some of these systematic issues, put pressure on these law enforcement in various places across the country. And he not seeing what it's about, saying it's a national issue and it's not a community issue. Excuse me, this is in your community. This is in the Salt Lake community. This is communities across what is the continental United States and around the world that are affected by these systematic issues. Him not realizing that, and then to go on and say, well, you're going to force me to fire people in a pandemic where people like him have taken advantage of government loans, where people like him have taken advantage of bailouts, of all these certain things that let him keep his precious coin collection while letting go of many people during a pandemic. So Shaka mentioned it's tone deaf. I don't know if there's something beyond tone deaf, but whatever it is, that's Dell Loy Hansen.
You mentioned his coin collection, Herc. Dell Loy Hansen bought a $1.3 million dime in August of 2019, and now, as you saw, threatening to lay more people off. Shaka, simple question. Would you play for Dell Loy Hansen?
No. Given if I have a choice at this point, absolutely not. And that's the issue here. As much as you're talking about these soccer clubs being a part of the community, you have to buy into that. You have to feel as a valued member of that community. You have to feel as a valued member of that team. And again, I reiterate, for people of color, I don't see how you can feel valued by Dell Loy Hansen, given what he said. we know more about fans and where they come from than now we know about what this club stands for, who they stand for, and how they continue to support not just those people in the dressing room, but that same community that is championing people of color. It is beyond me how somebody makes this kind of a statement. Somebody as accomplished, somebody who's been involved in sport and in a number of different levels that Leroy Hansen has, can somehow find themselves uttering this nonsense out loud in public, not even harboring their ignorance in any manner.
Herc, we're starting to hear from some players, Josie Altidore, Julian Gressel, among a few, who have already called for Hansen to sell the team. Do you think Dell Loy Hansen is fit to own an MLS franchise?
No, I don't. And I think this is a big problem in this country. And not only Major League Soccer, but across all professional sports. You look at ownership groups, you look at the big positions that are as sporting directors, GMs, coaches. Representation matters. And I'll ask you, when you look around the league in Major League Soccer in general, do you feel represented? Do you think that there are adequate enough slots when it comes to head coaching positions for minorities, GMs, ownership groups? This is why we are seeing players speak out. This is why we are seeing Josie Altidore himself saying, sell the team. I am part of an ownership group that wants to come in. Listen, Don Garber has a huge, huge responsibility and opportunity here. Don't be like the NFL, who will sit back and allow ownership groups like Dean Schneider. Be like the NBA, that once Sterling came about, once you saw what was at the root of the problem, it's out. He's gone, because our players, our people, they matter to us. What side will Don Garber be on?
Let me just say here, Seb, in response to what Herc is saying, and he's absolutely right. There needs to be better representation higher up the food chain in terms of football administration, club ownership, the makeup of their boards, etc. But when Nick Rimando, who ticks every single box that Hansen is talking about, that Herc and I are talking about right now, when Nick Rimando, who, as I say, represents all of those things, comes out in criticism of what the owner says, of what Hansen says, you know you're well on the wrong path here.
Yeah, Nick Rimando on Twitter saying disgusted. That was, as you used, Herc, your word. Shaka, I don't want to let Dell Loy Hansen steal the message of Wednesday night. Obviously, there was a story before Dell Loy Hansen opened his mouth. What did you think of the decision that we now know was clearly from MLS players, because they've taken issue with the league claiming credit for the decision? What do you think of the players deciding to sit out these games Wednesday night?
I applaud them fully. I thought it was a brave decision. I think it was the right decision. Time and time again, we know, history has shown us the value and the power of sport to effect change. Whether it's you want to go back to the army taking control and power in Brazil, João Havelange rising through the ranks within the Brazilian Football Federation and into FIFA, and roll that clock forward in every step along the way to this point. Now, we understand what sports means to the individual, to community, and to a political standing. And it's about time that the athletes who are the valued assets within sport take control and take command of how their value is utilized, of driving social change. I couldn't be more proud. I only wish I was still a player to be a part of it. I'm a fan and a neutral now, so I will sit down and support and clap as loudly as I possibly can and continue to champion their efforts and their causes.
Herc, for as important as the message was, it wasn't quite unified. What do you make of the fact that Orlando and Nashville played their game?
It's tricky, Seb. It's tricky, Shaka, because it is a league-wide rule that 90 minutes before the game is played, cell phones off in the locker room. That's fine. I understand that. But 30 minutes before the game, there were reports that the team, or Nashville, I should say, wasn't on the field yet. So there was obviously some dialogue going on before the game of whether this should be played or not. I understand the players turning their phones off and going into game mode. But the equipment managers, the medical staff, the coaching staff, all these other I guess, extra figures, they still have their phones on. And I've been part of these locker rooms. Shaka's been part of these locker rooms. Nobody completely has their phone off. They know what's going on. They're in touch with these players. I am sure that dialogue was had. I am sure they were notified at halftime that the rest of the teams around the league were not playing. These union reps have some explaining to do. I know they've mentioned that their phones were off. I know they mentioned they had no word of what was going on. I don't completely buy it. In some way, I applaud the rest of the league, but I wish these two teams, once they had heard word that it was a possibility, would have just stopped. We don't play until we know. That would have been great. 24 out of 26, like you said, is not unified. That said, I applaud the rest of the teams. I applaud Nashville and Orlando City afterwards for speaking of what's going on in these social injustices, these racial systematic issues in the country. But you wish the message would have been loud and clear, a unified front, 26 teams stopping.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.